In cross-border inheritance cases involving Vietnam, entitlement alone is not enough. Heirs living abroad often discover that the primary obstacle is not legal theory, it is documentation. Without complete and properly authenticated documents, asset transfer cannot proceed. The starting point for any inheritance procedure in Vietnam is the death certificate of the deceased. If issued abroad, it must typically be legalized or consular authenticated. Certified Vietnamese translation is required before submission to local authorities. Heirs must demonstrate their legal relationship to the deceased. This may include birth certificates, marriage certificates, or adoption decisions. Foreign civil status documents require legalization and certified translation. If the deceased left a will, the original or properly certified copy must be produced. Foreign wills may require legalization depending on jurisdictional requirements. Translation into Vietnamese is mandatory for use in probate proceedings. If probate has already been granted in another country, the foreign court judgment may require recognition by a Vietnamese court before it can produce enforceable legal effect domestically. Authentication and certified translation are prerequisites. Recognition is a separate judicial procedure and should not be confused with document legalization. Heirs must provide valid identification documents for foreign heirs. This includes passports and visa or resident status if relevant. Accurate identification ensures compliance with administrative requirements. Heirs residing abroad often appoint legal representatives in Vietnam. A power of attorney issued overseas must be notarized, legalized, and translated before use. Improper authorization delays proceedings. To inherit assets, documentation proving ownership of those assets by the deceased is required. For real estate, this includes the land use right certificate or housing ownership certificate. For corporate shares, share certificates and corporate registry extracts may be necessary. For bank accounts or financial assets in Vietnam, account documentation and confirmation from financial institutions may be required. Banks apply strict compliance standards. Without complete and properly authenticated documentation, release of funds will not be processed. Inheritance procedures may require tax declarations or confirmation of tax exemption eligibility. Close relatives often qualify for exemption under Vietnamese personal income tax rules. Proper classification is essential. In uncontested cases, heirs may proceed through a notarial declaration of inheritance. The notary office will review submitted documents for completeness and legality. Missing or improperly authenticated documents halt the process. If disputes arise, additional procedural filings are required in court. Evidence supporting heirship, validity of will, or asset ownership must be presented. Cross-border elements increase evidentiary complexity. Translations must be performed by certified translators recognized under Vietnamese regulations. Informal translations are insufficient. Accuracy affects substantive interpretation. Document collection and legalization abroad often take weeks or months. Families frequently underestimate this stage. Advanced preparation reduces delay. If assets exist, both in Vietnam and abroad, documentation may be required in multiple jurisdictions simultaneously. Consistency across filings prevents contradiction. Fragmentation increases risk. For inheritance of company shares, corporate charters, and shareholder agreements may need review. Transfer procedures depend on compliance with both inheritance law and corporate law. Documentation must align. Where compulsory heir protection is invoked, documentation may be required. To establish qualifying status, minor children are protected by law automatically. Adult children without working capacity may need to demonstrate their legal condition through supporting evidence. Status, not assumption, determines entitlement. If you intend to inherit assets in Vietnam from abroad, prepare documentation systematically. Death certificate. proof of relationship, will, ownership records, and legalized translations are foundational. Administrative precision determines success. Inheriting assets in Vietnam from abroad is legally possible, but entitlement must be supported by properly authenticated and translated documentation. In cross-border estates, process is as important as substance. Without procedural compliance, inheritance rights cannot be exercised. If you are inheriting assets in Vietnam from abroad, documentation is not a technical detail. It is the foundation of enforceability. Death certificates, proof of relationship, wills, ownership records, legalization, and certified translations must align before any transfer can proceed. To structure document preparation correctly and avoid procedural delay, contact LTS Law at lts.com.vn for coordinated cross-border inheritance support. In international estates, rights exist in principle, but only documentation makes them operational.